I'm Detective James, and this is the cases the news forgot. A lot of people think they know what America is. They think it's built on concrete and steel, facts and court procedure. But when you spend 56 years wearing a badge, you learn that the map is a lot bigger than the roads you drive on. Before we start, you need to understand something about the Navajo Nation. This isn't America the way most folks know it. It's a sovereign nation within the United States, 27,000 square miles across Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Their laws are different. Their police enforce federal law, traditional law, and some things they deal with, they just don't exist in our standard police manuals. If you've ever been to the Four Corners area, the real reservation, not the tourist spots, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you will change how you think about the American Southwest. I was brought in on a special consultation, a courtesy between jurisdictions, but what I actually walked into was the deep end of a mystery I still can't categorize. My contact was an officer named Mosey Ashkey. He was a good cop, made detective with LAPD by the time he was 30, but he'd come home to the Navajo Nation Police, stationed in Shiprock, New Mexico. He thought he knew police work, thought he'd seen everything a cop could see in one of the biggest, most violent cities in America. He was wrong, and I was about to be wrong right alongside him. The things they deal with here, they don't have FBI classifications, they don't appear in criminal databases, and when they call for backup, they better hope their sergeant believes them, because the nearest federal agent is 3 hours away, and they sure as hell won't understand what's being reported. Mosey's grandmother, his Shimasani, had raised him after his parents died. She'd tried to teach him the old traditions, but he'd been an angry kid, rejecting it all. He ran off to Los Angeles at 18, chasing a modern world. He was a sharp detective, maybe because he'd spent his life learning to see things others missed, even if he'd rejected the traditional teachings that trained him to notice. But his grandmother got sick, and he came home. She lasted 8 months, long enough to make him promise he'd stay, and long enough to tell him stories he'd refused to listen to as a teenager. Stories about things that lived in the desert, things that walked on 2 legs but weren't human. He thought they were just legends, traditional wisdom wrapped up in supernatural clothing. Then his grandmother died, and 3 days later, Mosey started his first shift with the Navajo Nation Police. The Shiprock Station is a low, modern building on Highway 64. The famous Shiprock Formation, a massive volcanic rock sacred to the people, looms in the distance. Mosey was met by Sergeant Desba Bitsui on his first day. She was 48, with iron gray hair and eyes that seemed to look right through you. She'd been with the department for 25 years, deeply knowledgeable about both modern policing and traditional ways. She gave Mosey a warning that she gave to all of them, a piece of laminated card with 7 rules typed in both English and Navajo. Rules like, never say the word ye naldlushi out loud, especially at night. Call them the witch if you must. Do not whistle at night. It calls things to you. If you hear your name called from the desert, never answer. Mosey, the former LAPD detective, had looked at her with skepticism. These are folklore, Sergeant. We're law enforcement. Her expression hardened. You spent 10 years in LA trying to be Bilagana, white. That's fine. But you're back on Dene land now, and here, the old rules still apply. These are not cultural sensitivity guidelines. They're survival instructions. Officers died because they thought like you're thinking right now. Mosey was paired with Officer Tasba Key, a young officer who was far more accepting of the traditional warnings. Tasba showed Mosey a photo on his phone, footprints in the red desert sand. They started as clear human bare feet. Then, over 20 feet, they transformed, the toes becoming claws, the stride lengthening impossibly. By the end, they were coyote tracks. Tasba had watched the transformation happen. He'd been following what he thought was a rabid coyote until it stopped, turned its head, and looked right at him. The eyes were wrong, too intelligent, too aware. That was when he knew it wasn't an animal. Before Mosey could fully wrap his head around that story, the radio crackled. Dispatch had a welfare check requested at the Little Water Chapter House. An elderly resident, Hostin Zilth, hadn't been seen in 4 days. The caller reported unusual activity, lights moving in the desert, and strange sounds described as whistling, multiple sources coming from different directions. Mosey knew that whistling was Protocol 3. Don't whistle at night, because it calls things to you. If someone was whistling around Old Man Zilth's place for 4 nights straight, something was already there. Or something was trying to call more. Mosey and Tasba headed out, Tasba warning him to follow his lead. The temperature was dropping fast. Hostin Zilth's home was a traditional hogan, an 8-sided structure with a modern manufactured home sitting next to it. Everything looked normal, but it was too quiet. No animal sounds. They approached the hogan, the door covered with a heavy blanket. Even from outside, I knew that sweet, rotten odor. It was death. Hostin Zilth was sitting in a wooden chair in the center of the hogan, facing east. He had been dead for days, but it wasn't the body that mattered. It was the scene around him. A perfect 8-foot circle was drawn on the dirt floor around the chair. The substance was a gray, fine ash with a slight shimmer. At 4 points around the circle, small piles of the same ash had been carefully arranged. "Corpse powder," Tasba whispered. "Someone marked him for the witch, for those things. This is a calling. Someone used traditional witchcraft to do it." Tasba was already backing toward the door. Traditional law takes precedence here. They needed the tribal officials and a Hatawi, a traditional healer, to perform the cleansing ceremonies before any modern police work could begin. As they stepped outside, Mosey noticed the ground. Tracks, lots of them, some human, some animal, and like in Tasba's photo, some that were transitioning from one to the other. "We need to leave now," Tasba said, pale. "Whoever did this might still be watching, and we just contaminated their work." As if in response, they heard it. A whistle, low and melodic, coming from the desert to the west, then another from the north, and a third from the south. They were being surrounded. "Get to the vehicle," Tasba commanded. As they pulled away, Mosey looked in the side mirror. 3 figures stood in the desert, maybe 100 yards from the hogan. They were too far to make out details, but close enough to see that their proportions were wrong. Too tall, too thin, moving in ways that seemed just slightly off, like someone mimicking human movement without quite understanding how it worked. "Don't look at them," Tasba barked. "Protocol 2. They know you can see them clearly if you make eye contact, and that makes you interesting. You want to stay not interesting." They drove for 5 minutes before Tasba called it in. Deceased male, evidence of traditional criminal activity, requesting the sergeant and a traditional healer. "What the hell did we just see?" Mosey asked. "Exactly what the protocols warn about," Tasba replied. "The skinwalkers, the witches, the ones who practice the dark side of our traditional medicine, they're real. The only question is whether you're going to accept that fast enough to stay alive." We pulled back into the Shiprock station about 20 minutes later, Mosey looking like he'd aged a decade in the 24 hours since I'd met him. Sergeant Desba Bitsui was waiting in the parking lot, and her expression was grim. Mosey gave her the full, strange briefing. The body, the perfect circle of corpse powder, the ash piles at the cardinal points, the tracks that turned from human to coyote, the whistling, and the 3 too-tall figures who watched us leave. I stood there, listening, still running all the facts through a procedural checklist and failing to find a single box to tick. Desba listened without interrupting, then nodded slowly. The traditional healer, the Hatawi named Sheila, was coming. But until then, that location was locked down. Then she spoke to Mosey about his past, something he hadn't shared with me. His grandmother had told Desba that Mosey had the sight as a boy, a sensitivity to things others couldn't perceive, and that he'd been on a path to become a medicine person until his parents died, and he'd slammed that door shut. Desba told him the sight doesn't leave, it just goes dormant. She gave him the laminated protocol card. Study it, follow it. The fact that you walked into a witch's killing ground on your first day, that's not coincidence. That's the old powers noticing your back, and they're going to test you. That night, alone in his small, rented trailer, Mosey lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to fit the sight of those figures into a reality he could accept. The memory of his grandmother's voice and her warnings echoed. Stories of the ones who walk on all fours, the witches who could take animal form. He'd dismissed it all as primitive superstition, but he'd seen the impossible tracks in the sand. His phone buzzed with a text from Tasba. Follow the protocols. They work. Then the whistle came again, low and melodic, the same pattern from Hastian Zilth's property. Closer this time, right outside his trailer. And then his name. Mosey, I need help. I'm lost out here. It was his dead grandmother's voice, weak, tired, exactly as she'd sounded in her final days. Protocol 7 was an iron cage around his instincts. If you hear your name called from the desert at night, never answer. It's never who you think it is. Every part of him, every fiber of his being screamed at him to help her. But the image of those two tall, wrong-moving figures in the desert froze him to the bone. He sat there, service weapon on the nightstand, listening to the thing outside, wear his grandmother's voice like a mask, calling his name over and over, getting more frightened. That's how it is on the nation, I realized. The rules you learn in the academy won't save you. Only knowledge passed down through 1,000 generations of survival will. Mosey didn't sleep. He sat with every light in the trailer on, listening as the voices cycled through his dead family. His mother, his father, even his own voice calling to himself from the darkness. When the sun finally rose, the voices stopped. He showed up for his shift, looking like hell, and Tasba simply handed him a coffee. "It visited you last night, didn't it?" Mosey confirmed he'd followed the protocol, and Tasba gave him the cold truth. Best case, you'd wake up 3 days later in the desert with no memory. Worst case, you'd become one of them, or just disappear. Tasba then pulled up the missing person reports. Dozens of disappearances over decades, all from the Shiprock area, and all connected by two details. They happened within a week of a new moon, and each person was last seen near Highway 491 after dark. Protocol 6. That highway used to be called Highway 6X6, the Devil's Highway, Tasba said. That stretch between Shiprock and Gallup is their perfect hunting ground. That road takes people. Sergeant Desba walked in, and they geared up. Sheila, the Hatawi, had completed the cleansing ceremony at dawn. The scene was now clear for processing. The Hogan and the surrounding desert looked ordinary in the morning light, but the oppressive weight was gone. Sheila, an elderly woman with deep, clouded eyes, confirmed the cleansing, but warned that the evil was still out there. Whoever did this, they're skilled in the dark ways, and there's more than one. 3 of them working together, very dangerous. She looked directly at Mosey. Especially you, grandson of Evening Star Woman. That's why they're interested. You're a challenge, a threat, or a potential recruit. She gave him a small, warm leather bag of protection medicine, a charm his grandmother had started before she died. "Thank your grandmother," Sheila said. "She's the one still protecting you." They processed the scene. Hastian Zilth had died of natural causes, but the cause of death was irrelevant. The presence of the corpse powder was the crime. Tasba photographed the circles before incinerating the ash with a road flare. It burned with a strange, sickly green flame and a smell that confirmed Tasba's grim assessment. Human remains. They spent the rest of the day interviewing, and the trail led to the victim's angry 32-year-old grandson, Bidsy Gorman. Hastian Zilth had refused to let Bidsy inherit his land, saying the boy was walking a dark path. Bidsy ran with 2 others, Nazwa Dooley and Chaitan Sells, all 3 suspected of grave desecration. 3 suspects, 3 figures in the desert. That evening, Mosey and Tasba drove out to Bidsy Gorman's last known address, a rundown trailer near Hogback. They found it abandoned, but not empty. Inside, in a back bedroom, they found a workshop. Grinding stones dusted with gray powder, clay jars filled with ash, and on the wall, symbols drawn in dried blood. "This is where they make the corpse powder," Tasba said quietly. "We document, we leave. We come back tomorrow with backup and a Hatawi." He started snapping photos. Then, the whistling began again, low and melodic, coming from multiple directions around the trailer. "Out, now!" They scrambled to the patrol vehicle just as three figures emerged from the desert. In the dying light, Mosey could see them clearly now. They looked like young men, but their movements were too fluid, too fast, and their eyes reflected the headlights like animals. Bidsy Gorman stood in the center, and he smiled. His voice carried clearly, yet impossibly far across the distance. "Officer Ashke, welcome home. Your grandmother sends her regards." Mosey's blood ran cold. Tasba slammed the gas pedal to the floor, and they fishtailed out of there in a cloud of dust. In the rearview mirror, the three figures just stood there, watching them go. They knew who Mosey was. They knew about his grandmother, and they had been waiting. "They're skinwalkers," Tasba said, gripping the wheel. "They can see things normal people can't. And now, they know we know what they are. They have to make a decision, scare us off or eliminate us. They don't care about the law. Navajo law, federal law, none of it matters to them. When people break the biggest taboos in their own culture, when they embrace dark witchcraft, they're already considered dead by traditional standards. The only question for us was whether they'd take us with them before the community could deal with them." We reported back to Desba, who immediately called a meeting with the tribal council leadership and the Hatawi, including Sheila. I wasn't invited, being too new and too much of an outsider, despite being Navajo. But Tasba filled me in. They were organizing a traditional response. Medicine people would perform protection ceremonies for everyone involved in the investigation, and they authorized us to move forward with arrests, but only during daylight hours and only with backup. No lone operations, no nighttime raids. That gives them free rein after dark, but it keeps us alive. As Tasba pointed out, there's a reason these protocols exist. The skinwalkers are strongest at night, especially during the new moon, and we don't fight them when they have the advantage. When was the next new moon? 3 days. I spent those 3 days learning more than I ever wanted to know about Ye Na Lushi, the skinwalkers. Sheila came to the station and gave a briefing that sounded less like police training and more like a horror movie script. She explained they are witches who gain their power by killing a close family member. This act breaks them spiritually, separating them from the beauty way, the path of balance central to Navajo philosophy. In exchange, they gain the ability to wear animal skins and take that animal's form. Coyote is most common, but also wolf, bear, owl, and crow. They do transform, she said, but it's never quite right. There's always something off. The eyes, the movement, the smell. Animals instinctively know they're wrong and will flee. Humans with the sight can tell too. Sheila confirmed that Bidsy, Gorman, Naswood Dooley, and Chayton Sells were all skinwalkers, a very rare occurrence for three to work together. It meant they were planning something big, something that required combined power. Like what? Like creating more of their kind. They're trying to recruit. Bidsy had tried to recruit his own grandmother years ago, which she refused, likely fueling his hatred. Now, the old man, Hostin Zilth, had been a necessary sacrifice. He had spiritual protection and blessed land, and Bidsy couldn't touch that land as long as he lived. With the grandfather dead and the protection broken through dark witchcraft, Bidsy could claim it and use it for his dark purposes. The day before the new moon, we tried to arrest all 3 suspects. We were too late. They'd known we were coming and had scattered. They'll surface again during the new moon, Despa said. That's when they're strongest. That's when they'll feel confident enough to move openly. Until then, everyone stays alert. No one travels alone. No one goes out after dark. She distributed small leather protection pouches, blessed by 5 different Hatawi. They're not a guarantee, but they help. That night, the night before the new moon, I was back in my trailer with every light on, the protection pouch around my neck, and the service weapon close. The logical part of my brain, the LAPD part, was screaming that this was insane. I was a cop, afraid of 3 men who believed they could turn into animals. But the part of me that remembered my grandmother's stories, the part that had seen those figures moving wrong in the desert, knew better. Around midnight, the scratching started. At my door, the windows, then the roof, like something with claws was circling, testing the weak points. Then, the voice came again, my own voice calling from outside. "Mosey, let me in. I'm locked out, Mosey, please. It's cold out here." The scratching intensified. Then, it changed tactics. "Mosey, your grandmother is here with me. She wants to talk to you. Let us in." I sat frozen, gripping the weapon, reminding myself it was a lie, a trap. The scratching suddenly stopped, replaced by a deep, unnatural silence. Then, something massive hit my trailer with enough force to rock it on its foundation. The lights flickered. Another impact and another, like something huge was ramming the trailer, trying to break through the walls. I caught glimpses through the window of something too large to be a man, too large to be a coyote, something wrong in every way. Then it spoke, and the voice was so loud it seemed to come from everywhere. "You can't hide behind walls forever, grandson of Evening Star Woman." Then came the specific threat. "The new moon comes tomorrow, and we will be waiting for you on Highway 491. One final violent impact that cracked the window, and then silence. TSBA arrived minutes later with backup. They found human, coyote, and transitional tracks, and deep gouges in the trailer siding, where something with claws had tried to tear through the metal. "You need to move," TSBA said. They specifically mentioned Highway 491, the new moon. "They're trying to terrorize you, make you scared, unstable, easier to manipulate." He helped me gather my things. I crashed at TSBA's house that night, finding what little comfort I could in the presence of his family and the protection ceremonies his wife performed. The next morning, the new moon day, I met TSBA at the station. She had assembled all 6 officers, several tribal rangers, and 2 FBI agents who handled reservation cases. The FBI guys looked skeptical. TSBA laid out the suspects, the motive, the evasion, and the use of traditional dark witchcraft. The younger agent, Patterson, was incredulous. "Supernatural? Seriously? We're federal law enforcement, not Ghostbusters." TSBA gave him a look cold enough to crack granite. "Then you're welcome to leave, Agent. This is Navajo Nation jurisdiction, and we don't need your disrespect for our cultural beliefs." Agent Yazzie, the older Navajo agent, calmed the room. "We need to focus on evidence that holds up in court. Trackable movements, physical evidence." I spoke up. "They came to my home last night and made direct threats, specifically mentioning Highway 491 and the new moon." Patterson pointed out that was 60 miles of empty desert between Shiprock and Gallup. "What are we supposed to do? Set up checkpoints every mile?" "No," Agent Yazzie said. "We identify the most isolated stretches, the places where someone would go if they wanted privacy for whatever they're planning." TSBA pulled up a map. "There's one spot in particular. About 30 miles south of Shiprock, there's an old abandoned trading post, been closed since the 1970s. Very isolated," I remember TSBA saying, "but there's a dirt road that leads back to it from the highway. If I wanted a place to conduct ceremonies or rituals away from prying eyes, that's where I'd go." TSBA nodded. The plan was set. Surveillance at the trading post starting at dusk. Multiple units, good sight lines. Observe first, and only move to arrest when we had an overwhelming advantage. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Patterson, the skeptical FBI agent, asked what we should do if we observed them performing some kind of ritual. "Then we document it and we stop it," TSBA said firmly. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, Agent Patterson, what these men are doing is illegal. Grave desecration, murder, terroristic threatening. That's enough to arrest them on. Agent Yazzie, the elder Navajo agent, pulled Mosey aside. He knew Mosey's grandmother, and he understood the danger. There are things in this world that don't fit neatly into FBI training manuals, he said carefully. I believe that people who've lived on this land for thousands of years might know things that recent arrivals don't. I take the witchcraft angle seriously. He touched his own chest, where the outline of a medicine pouch was visible under his shirt. Make sure you're wearing protection. Tonight's going to be dangerous. We spent the afternoon preparing. Sheila came by to perform a protection ceremony for everyone, even the 2 FBI agents. Patterson looked uncomfortable, but went through with it. As sunset approached, we deployed to our positions. Desba, Tasba, and I took point on a ridge overlooking the old trading post. The old stone building, roof mostly collapsed, looked exactly like a place where bad things would happen in the deepening gloom. We settled in. How long do we wait? Mosey asked quietly. As long as it takes, Desba replied. The new moon is tonight. If they're going to do something, it'll be between midnight and dawn when the power is strongest. The hours crawled by, the desert cold seeping in. At 11:47 p.m., Tasba tensed. A movement southwest side. I looked through the night vision scope and saw them. 3 figures approaching the trading post on foot, coming from deep desert. They moved with that wrong, too fluid motion. Gorman, Dooley, and Sells. They entered the building through a collapsed wall. After several minutes, a light began to flicker inside. Not electric, but the harsh orange glow of fire. They were starting a ritual. Desba radioed the other units. Hold positions and observe. Through the scope, the 3 men were arranging something. Then they began to chant, their mouths moving in unison. Ritual preparation, Agent Yazzie confirmed over the radio. About 20 minutes later, the fire burned brighter, and the 3 figures began to change. I watched it happen, even through the eerie green of the night vision. Their bodies contorted, reshaping, dropping to all 4s. The transformation was painful and grotesque, like bones breaking and reforming. Within minutes, where 3 men had stood, 3 large coyotes now paced around the fire. Jesus Christ! Patterson breathed over the radio. Confirm visual, Desba said, her voice a solid line of control. Subjects appear to have transformed. The coyotes threw back their heads and howled. The sound was terrifying, and in the distance, other howls answered, many others. We've got more movement, a tribal ranger reported. Multiple animals approaching from all directions. Coyotes, maybe 20 or 30 of them. The pack converged on the trading post. They moved wrong, too, their eyes reflecting the firelight with an unnatural intelligence. They're calling more of their kind, Tasba whispered. This is a gathering. They're trying to build an army. The 3 original skinwalkers in the arriving pack formed a circle around the fire, and a more unnatural chanting began, coming from coyote throats. In the center of the circle, something began to materialize. It started as smoke, then shadow, but it took shape, becoming a figure, tall and impossibly thin, with antlers or horns sprouting from its head. I was looking at something that had no business existing in the physical world. Something they're summoning, Agent Yazzie murmured. Something old, something that shouldn't be called back. The entity opened its eyes. Even from a quarter mile away, I saw them glowing red in the darkness, and I knew with absolute certainty that it was looking directly at us. It sees us, Mosey said. It knows we're here. All units fall back, Desba ordered. Controlled retreat to vehicles. Move now. But we barely started moving when the howling changed. It became louder, more aggressive, and the entire pack of skinwalker coyotes broke from their circle and started racing toward our positions. They're coming, a ranger shouted. Gunshots, screaming, chaos. The radio cut to static. Desba, Tasba and I scrambled into our vehicle. Tasba floored the engine, Desba called for emergency backup, and I was in the back, watching maybe a dozen coyotes close the distance. We pulled onto Highway 491, accelerating hard, but they kept pace impossibly. Some began transforming mid-run, shifting between animal and human form, their bodies like grotesque shadows in our headlights. One leaped onto the hood, claws scrabbling on the metal. I saw its face, human and coyote at the same time, red eyes, too many teeth. I fired 3 rounds through the windshield. The creature flew backward, but 2 more immediately took its place. Tasba swerved violently, throwing them off, and pushed the vehicle even faster. Ahead, something worse appeared. The tall figure with the antlers was standing in the middle of Highway 491, directly in our path. It didn't move, just stood there waiting. "Don't slow down!" Desba yelled. "Drive through it." Tasba gritted his teeth and kept the accelerator floored. We were doing 90 miles per hour when we hit the figure. There was no impact. We passed straight through it like it wasn't even there, but as we did, the temperature inside the vehicle dropped instantly to freezing. Frost formed on the windows, and Mosey heard his grandmother's voice, clear as day, speaking in Navajo. "The fourth world is breaking. They're trying to bring through the old darkness. You must stop them, grandson. You must finish what I started." Then, the warmth returned. The frost vanished, and we were past the figure. I saw the towering entity and the pack of skinwalkers stop their pursuit in the rearview mirror. They just stood there on the highway, watching us escape. "Now what the hell just happened?" Tasba demanded, his voice thick with adrenaline. "I think my grandmother just saved us," Mosey said. "From the other side." We rendezvoused with Agent Yazzie and Patterson 3 miles down the highway. They'd made it out with minor injuries, but the 2 tribal rangers had fared worse. Only one had made it to his vehicle. The other had been taken by the pack. Patterson, all his earlier skepticism burned away by terror, was shaking. "We need a full tactical response," he insisted. "Whatever the hell they were, we need military-grade backup." "By the time any backup arrives, they'll be gone," Desba said flatly. She looked at Mosey. "Your grandmother spoke to you. What did she say?" Mosey repeated the message. "The fourth world is breaking. They're trying to bring through the old darkness." Sheila's voice, patched into our frequency, came over the radio. "In Navajo cosmology, we live in the fourth world now. The 3 previous worlds were destroyed because of imbalance and evil. If they're trying to break the fourth world, they're trying to unleash chaos and old evils that were banished." "How do we stop it?" Desba asked. "You must complete the ceremony they started, but with opposite intention," Sheila instructed. "Balance against chaos, healing against harm. But it requires someone with traditional knowledge and spiritual strength, someone who can walk between worlds." Everyone looked at Mosey. "No," he insisted. "I don't have that training. I rejected all of that." "You have your grandmother's blood," Sheila countered, "and her knowledge is in you whether you acknowledge it or not. She spent your whole childhood preparing you for this." Mosey suddenly remembered the endless nights his grandmother had sung to him in Navajo, songs he thought were just lullabies, prayers she'd made him memorize. He realized Sheila was right. It was all still there, buried in his memory, waiting for him to need it. What do I have to do? Over the next 2 hours, with dawn approaching, Sheila walked him through the counter ritual. The songs he needed to sing, the prayers he needed to speak, the offerings he needed to make. It was a complicated ceremony, usually taking years to master, but his grandmother had given him the foundation. "You'll have to go back to the trading post," Sheila warned, "and you'll have to do this alone. Traditional law requires it. One person walking the dark path, one person walking the beauty way. Balance. They'll kill me the second I step onto that ground." "Maybe. But if you maintain perfect harmony and balance, their dark power can't touch you. It's like water and oil, they can't mix." The plan was insane, but it was all we had. As the sun began to rise, we drove back. The skinwalkers were gone, and the entity had vanished, but I could feel them nearby, watching, waiting. Mosey got out of the vehicle alone, carrying only his grandmother's medicine pouch and the knowledge she'd drilled into him. Tasba, Desba, and the FBI agents stayed back, weapons ready, helpless to intervene in this kind of fight. Mosey entered the trading post. The fire was still burning, impossibly bright, and the ash circles still glowed with malevolent power. Standing around the fire, waiting for him, were Bidsy Gorman, Naswood Dooley, and Chayton Sells, back in human form, smiling with too many teeth. "Grandson of Evening Star Woman," Bidsy sneered. "Join us, learn the real power, become what you were always meant to be." Mosey took a deep breath and began to sing. The words came from somewhere deep inside, from those forgotten childhood nights. A healing song, a protection song, a song about balance and the beauty way. The skinwalkers' smiles faltered. Mosey sang louder. With each verse, the fire burned brighter but cleaner, the malevolent glow replaced by pure light. "Stop!" Bidsy snarled. "You'll ruin everything." But Mosey kept singing. As he sang, the forgotten memories flooded back, every story, every prayer, every lesson about harmony. He remembered who he was supposed to be. The darkness they'd summoned began to retreat, pulled back through the broken door. The skinwalkers screamed, their forms flickering between human and animal as the power they'd stolen began to leave them. Mosey sang until the sun fully rose, until the darkness was completely banished, until 3 young men stood before him. Just men again, powerless and terrified. "Freeze! Hands up!" Tasba and Desba rushed in. The 3 men didn't resist. They were swaying, barely conscious. As we led them out in handcuffs, Agent Yazzie approached Mosey. "What you just did in there? I've never seen anything like it." "My grandmother taught me," Mosey replied. "I just finally learned to listen." The arrests made headlines. 3 men charged with murder, grave desecration, and assault. The media was cautious. Some talked about witchcraft, others sanitized it as cult activity. The tribal prosecutor explained that justice in Navajo tradition wasn't just punishment. It was restoration of balance. These men were victims of the witchcraft as much as they were perpetrators, and they would undergo traditional healing ceremonies if they agreed. It wasn't the clean resolution I was used to in Los Angeles. But I was learning that justice here looked different, more complicated, focused on healing the entire community. The FBI closed their case with unusual speed. Agent Yazzie told Mosey privately that the higher-ups wanted the whole thing buried. Too many unexplainable elements, too many officers who'd witnessed things that didn't fit into official reality. "The truth is in there, if you know how to read between the lines," he said. But most people won't look that closely. 3 weeks later, Mosey was sitting in Sheila's home as she prepared traditional medicine. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said. "You remembered the songs. You restored balance." "I almost got people killed," Mosey countered. "The ranger who was taken, he has nightmares now." "Yes," Sheila agreed, "because he saw the darkness. But he's alive. And the darkness was sent back to where it belongs. That's what matters. Your grandmother spent 18 years preparing you for one night, one moment when you would have to choose," Sheila said, her voice soft but firm. "The easy path of power and anger, or the hard path of balance and healing. You chose correctly." Mosey argued he hadn't chosen. He'd just done what she taught him. "That's what choosing correctly looks like," Sheila replied. "The right path becomes natural when you've trained for it long enough." She handed him a new, stronger protection medicine bag. "You'll need it." Mosey protested that the skinwalkers were in custody. "Those 3, yes," Sheila confirmed. "But darkness exists in more than 3 people. You've proven you have power, proven you can walk between worlds. Other practitioners will be interested. Some will want to test you. Some will want to recruit you. Some will want to eliminate you before you become a threat." Sheila tied the medicine bag with red cord. "You're not just a police officer anymore, Mosey. You're a bridge between the old ways and the new. The Navajo Nation needs people who can operate in both worlds." I watched Mosey absorb this. His grandmother, Evening Star Woman, had struggled to bridge the two worlds, but Mosey, having walked in the outside world and then reclaimed his heritage, understood both sides. That, Sheila said, made him invaluable. Over the following months, Mosey settled into his role. The protocols went from superstition to second nature. He learned when to investigate by the book and when to call in a Hatawi. They dealt with the usual police work, but they also dealt with teenage girls being lured into the desert by calling ceremonies, and elderly men targeted by traditional witchcraft in neighbor disputes. Each case reminded him of a lesson his grandmother had tried to teach him years ago. 6 months after the Skinwalker incident, Desba called him into her office. The tribal council had approved new training protocols. Starting next year, all Navajo Nation police officers would receive formal, ongoing training in traditional law and cultural practices, working directly with the Hatawi. "It was your case that pushed it through," Desba said, and she wanted Mosey to help develop the curriculum, working with Sheila. Then came the second bombshell. The FBI wants to create a specialized unit for reservation cases involving traditional crimes. Agent Yazy recommended you to head the tribal side of the task force. Mosey protested he'd only been on the job 6 months. "And you've accomplished more in those 6 months than most officers do in 5 years, Desba countered. "You stopped 3 skinwalkers from summoning something that could have threatened the entire region. That makes you exactly who we need." It was a long way from LAPD homicide, but it felt right. He agreed. "Good, because we've already got your first case for the task force." Desba pulled up a file. Disappearances along Highway 160 near the Arizona border. 4 people in the last 3 months, all young adults, all last seen driving at night. And she paused. They had all been asking around about skinwalkers before they vanished, like they were looking for them. Local PD is treating it as standard missing persons. FBI is looking at trafficking, but the traditional signs are all there. Protocol 6, Protocol 7, multiple violations. Whatever was happening, it wouldn't be solved by conventional police work. As Mosey left, Tasba was waiting, coffee in hand. "Heard you're moving up, task force leader. Pretty impressive for a guy who showed up 6 months ago thinking the protocols were superstition." "I had a good teacher," Mosey admitted. "You just finally decided to listen." Tasba warned him about the Highway 160 territory, especially the stretch near Cow Springs. Old battlegrounds, places where bad things happened. Even the land remembers violence. Sometimes it attracts more violence, or things that feed on violence. That evening, Mosey drove out to his grandmother's old house. He found a wooden box she'd kept locked. Inside were dozens of journals going back 50 years, his grandmother's records of every ceremony, every case she'd helped with, every encounter with the supernatural she'd documented. On top was a letter addressed to him. "My grandson," it read, "if you're reading this, I am gone, and you have finally opened your eyes to what you are meant to be. I always knew you would find your way back. You are the bridge, Mosey, between old and new, between traditional and modern, between the world people see and the world that really exists beneath the surface." She was sorry for the hard path, but proud he'd come home. "Walk in beauty, my grandson. I am proud of you. I was always proud of you." Mosey sat there and cried, not just from grief, but from understanding. She'd known he would leave, known he would reject the teachings, and she'd prepared him anyway. When he finally stopped, he loaded the journals into his truck. They would form the foundation of the new training program. Later that night, as he began reading the journals, his phone rang. "Mosey, you need to see this," Tasba said without preamble. "Another disappearance on Highway 160. Her car was found abandoned near Cow Springs. And Mosey, there were tracks around the car, the kind that changed from human to animal. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Mosey said. He grabbed his gear and headed out, touching the medicine pouch around his neck. 6 months ago, he'd been a Los Angeles cop running from his heritage, convinced that modern science was the only answer. Now, he was a Navajo Nation police officer racing into the darkness to track something that most of the world didn't believe existed. He thought about his grandmother's letter. "Walk in beauty, my grandson." He was trying every day. The radio crackled with Tasba's voice. "Mosey, we've got something. Fresh tracks leading away from the vehicle, heading into the desert, and we can hear whistling. Multiple sources moving in the same direction as the tracks." "I'm 5 minutes out," Mosey said, pushing the accelerator harder. "Nobody follows those tracks until I get there. And Tasba, make sure everyone's wearing their protection medicine." "Already done," Tasba replied. "We learned from last time." Mosey raced toward the flashing lights, toward another case that existed in the space between two worlds. The Navajo Nation stretched out around him, 27,000 square miles of sacred land and ancient power. He was one of the few people with the knowledge to protect the people who called this land home. "My name is Mosey Oshki, officer with the Navajo Nation Police. And this is what I do. I protect people from things they don't believe in. I enforce laws older than this country. I walk the line between the world you see and the world that really exists. And I wouldn't have it any other way."